Kutuzov attended engineering school at age 12. He was entered into the Russian army 2 years later because of his lieutenant father. Alexander Suvorov was his mentor. He taught him everything he knew about war strategies and tactical techniques. As he grew older in the army, he was promoted to colonel and later on general. He suffered many severe wounds, including losing one of his eyes, but he never gave up on his country. Napoleon also started at an early age working for the military and training. He was educated in military school and was promoted rapidly. At the end of his military career, he was chief commander of the entire French army. He also worked his way up in politics, deeming himself first consul for life and eventually making his way up to emperor. The battle was fought on September 7, 1812. It was said to be one of the bloodiest battles of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon had about 130,000 troops, and Kutuzov had about 120,000. They fought violently and fiercely from 6 a.m. to noon. By noon, Kutuzov had exhausted every available soldier to the efforts, while Napoleon had nearly 10,000 fresh troops he refused to send in. By doing this, Napoleon forfeited winning the battle easily and quickly. The battle turned into a cannon fight, and late into the night, Kutuzov and his troops withdrew from exhaustion. The very next week, Napoleon and his men invaded the city of Borodino completely unopposed. Although Napoleon won this battle, he did not win the war against Russia.
The Battle of Borodino was one of the largest and most important battles of the War of 1812. But the biggest question we have is, why did it even happen? Assembling the Grand Army in eastern Poland, Napoleon prepared to renew hostilities with Russia in mid-1812. They went to great efforts to procure the supplies they needed for the effort, but they barely had enough to sustain a short campaign. Napoleon began his initial invasion of Russia on June 16, 1812. It was then when Emperor Alexander proclaimed a patriotic war in response and prepared to face the French. Only a few months after this date, that was when the Battle of Borodino occurred, and this was one of the main reasons why the battle occurred in and of itself. Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812 was, of course, the main reason why the battle occurred in the first place. Historians from both Russian and French sides have theories that suggest otherwise, and they also have theories that suggest there were more than one reason, but all of these theories are not backed up by any evidence, so we just consider them as not fact for now. Until they have evidence to back up the theories, this is the main reason and the universally accepted reason as to why the Battle of Borodino occurred.
The French lost about 33,000 casualties, and the Russians lost about 44,000 casualties. There were at least 70 to 85,000 killed and or wounded. This was one of the largest and bloodiest single days of action of the Napoleonic Wars, involving more than 250,000 troops and resulting in at least 70,000 total casualties. The Battle of Borodino was a pivotal point in the campaign since it was the last offensive attack fought by Napoleon in Russia. By withdrawing, this gave Russia the opportunity to force Napoleon out of Russia for good by using all their military potential and to reevaluate their troops and basically to rearm and rebuild. In December, Napoleon abandoned what remained of his army and raced back to Paris, where the people were saying that he died and he led an unsuccessful coup. He traveled very secretly across Europe with a few of his cohorts, and he reached the capital of his empire on December 18th. 6 days after the Grand Amore finally left Russia, with Europe encouraged by his devastating defeat in Russia, an allied force rose and defeated Napoleon in 1814. He was then exiled to the island of Elba, where he escaped to France in early 1815 and raised a new army that enjoyed fleeting success before its crushing defeat at Waterloo in June 1815. Napoleon was then exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he died 6 years later. Basically, since he lost the Battle of Borodino, he ended up losing the entire war altogether.
The Battle of Borodino was a battle fought between Napoleon and Kutuzov. Kutuzov first put up his best troops, which was Barclay's First Army. His left side was really weak because he wasn't expecting reinforcements in this area. He eventually consolidated nearly half of his artillery into a reserve. The Russians failed at striking the French before they struck them, so they fell back. They kept falling back and back. The next day, the French launched a massive assault on the SR and took 4,000 lives. At this point, the Russians were failing and their casualties were building up. The battle went back and forth for hours and hours. Finally, the French were able to cross the river into the village and made the Russians surrender, while their casualty count was rising from 45,000 as the French only lost 35,000. Napoleon would have won a lot sooner, but he is so stubborn and won't put in all of his troops at once, so he basically just wasted a lot of soldiers, even though he still gained the territory of Moscow by winning the Battle of Borodino.